All right, thank you. I want to welcome everybody once again. October the 11th, we're in session 6 of our Bible study tonight, and it's God Protects. And if you have your personal study guide, why don't you go ahead and get that out? I have no idea what page that would be on because I don't have the personal study guide. 65?
55.
55, all right, so go to 55 in your personal study guide. And y'all roll out because I won't be able to hear you from here. But once again, I want to thank New Providence Baptist Church just for the opportunity to come and bring the message tonight. Also, it's only my second time talking behind the camera or in front of the camera, and it's a little bit different, but hopefully we'll go a little bit smoother than last time. It's kind of like when Becky asked me to vacuum, I tried to throw dirt around all over the house, so she won't ever ask me again. But apparently that didn't work last time, and they've invited me back here in October, and so we'll see how it goes. But I do appreciate everybody coming in tonight, and I know a lot are on fall break, and but with the advent of Facebook and YouTube and other ways of coming in, we can be anywhere at any time. And once again, we're going to be starting with chapter 1 and going through all 9 chapters of all 9 verses of chapter 31. So there's a lot to unpack tonight, and I really like this. I always seem to get lucky. I got lucky on the last one when we did Proverbs, and I feel like I get lucky on this lesson as well. Because this is a contrast of with God's sword of judgment, along with His shield of protection that He's going to show here in these verses. And we're going to have a little bit of backstory here because there's quite a bit, like I said, to unpack. And then when we first start out in these verses, it's going to be why is Isaiah, saying this? Why is he prophesying these words? And so we need to back up just a little bit, go back a little bit in history to see how we got to this point. And so we're going to jump right in with the first verse. And then, like I said, we're going to back up a little bit, and then we'll go through verse by verse until we get to verse 9. And shouldn't keep you too long tonight. And we'll start with the first verse says, "Woe to those who go down to Egypt for help and who depend on horses. They trust in the abundance of chariots and in the large number of horsemen. They do not look to the Holy One of Israel, and they do not seek the Lord." The very first word in that is woe, W-O-E. It means judgment. Judgment's coming. We're entering in a series of pronouncements of judgments. This is the same word that's used we're using the Christian Standard Bible, which kind of replaced the Holman, which Lifeway came up with and we used for years, and now this is the Christian Standard Bible. But even if you're using the New King James, the NIV, the King James Version, it all starts with that first word, woe. It's pretty self-explanatory, maybe unless you're in the Message Bible, and it probably says, "Oh, no, they didn't," which you probably hear in Walmart when somebody's yelling at Junior and getting ready to get hit with a flip-flop or something. But that Message Bible it uses a lot of different vernacular. But woe is pretty self-explanatory, so we need to back up and figure out why is this in here? Why are we putting this judgment upon the Israelites and their enemies, as we'll get to here in just a minute. So in order to back up, this is in the 700s BC. Remember, BC counts backwards, so it would be 700, and then the next year would be 699. So we're looking at in the 700s BC here, we have the superpowers, which are Assyria here to the east. We have Egypt to the west. Already the northern kingdom in Syria have been defeated. They're now smashed by the Assyrians that have come in. The southern kingdom, which was Judah, said that, hey, we want you on our side. We're going to ally, which was a common practice, which God had said, "I am your protector. I am the one that keeps you. I'm the one that protects you, and you're not to go to these other places." So it kind of explains a little bit there in verse 1. But they had allied with the Assyrians. The Assyrians went in and conquered the northern kingdom, went in and conquered Syria. Now that they're controlling this entire area around. Unfortunately for Israel, they lie between these two great superpowers. It's this little bitty country. It's water on one side with the Mediterranean Sea, and now you have Egypt on one side, which was a very rich and powerful country, and now you have the up-and-coming Assyrians, which are wanting to go and defeat Egypt. And now Judah is paying money in gold to the Assyrian Empire. In so much that they are actually pulling and pulling the gilding of the. If you ever heard of the Gilded Age, that's where they would put very fine amounts of gold on the outer layers, and they're pulling that off. They've emptied out the treasury. They have no more money, which has obviously made them into a very weakened state at this point. So now the Assyrians are looking to attack and defeat Judah. And so they are now wanting to go to Egypt for help because Egypt also being a superpower. This was completely forbidden by Deuteronomy, by the Lord God himself. He said, do not go to them for their horses, for their chariots. And now he says in verse 1, woe to those who go down to Egypt, because that's what they're looking at. And God is testing them. He's trying them as a test of their faith. It's going to reveal their true character here. And he's doing it by trial by fire. We've heard that before, and it's very interesting as I was looking up how gold is refined into the product that we get today. And I looked down at my ring, which is considered white gold, and there is no such thing as white gold. All gold is yellow, but they have to put impurities in it in order to get it to be white, which is nickel or silver is what they put in, and then they have to put a special coating on it. Sometimes you can see a little bit of yellow come through this white gold ring. But and it's 14 karat, which means it's not pure. In order to get pure gold, it's talking about these trials by fire that the Israelites are getting to go through, and that we also are. And a crisis reveals our character. And your personal study guide question has that, and it's something that if you don't have a chance to do it now, I want you to go over later as we close tonight. I want you to go back and in your personal study guide, page 55 says, how does a crisis reveal a person's true character and beliefs? Why does a crisis bring out the best and worst in a person? And in order to get pure gold, gold just doesn't come out of the ground pure. Even when you're panning for gold, as you may have seen people do back the 49ers, even in California, which caused the gold rush. That is only about 18 karat, sometimes 14 karat gold. It's still not pure with impurities. So the only way to get those impurities out is to put it in a vessel which will withstand an enormous amount of heat. In this sense, gold melts at 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit, or for our European viewers, 1,000 degrees Celsius, a little over, give degrees there. So you'll put that gold in there. The person that is with that, the person that is mastering this fire, will stand there. It's extremely hot. It's extremely dangerous job to have. The bellows would be going to get this fire so hot that you would melt gold. Now, the other impurities, some of them come out. You'll get some of the others out 500, 600 degrees. Some of the dross would come to the top, and then you would scrape that dross off. That person would have to stand there at this extremely hot fire and draw that dross off, or the junk, we might say. Now, silver and copper and lead were all mixed in a lot of times with gold. If you find silver, oftentimes you'll find gold. If you find lead, a lot of times you'll find gold. Those have especially copper has a very close melting point to gold as well. So it took a very fine and skilled craftsman to do that. And we oftentimes are put through trials of fire, which is God is using the enemies of the people of Judah, his chosen people. He's putting them through a trial to reveal their character and to see what they would do. And what they did was they're going to Egypt. So they're turning back to, you might say, what accounts to an abusive relationship. We'll get into that in a minute, how they were led out of Egypt, the Israelites were. And so we're going to look at that. But this gets us up to this point here. So you've got the Assyrian army threatening Judah. You've got the Israelites wanting to go to Egypt to pull them into this battle to help them out. And spoiler alert, they don't come. And so this has led us up to here. We go on to chapter 2 now. And there's a little sarcasm here, I think. Prophetic sarcasm, my book says. It says verses 2 and 3. But he also is wise and brings disaster.
He does not go back on what he says. He will rise up against the house of the wicked and against the allies of evildoers. Egyptians are men, not God. Their horses are flesh, not spirit. When the Lord raises his hand to strike, the helper will stumble, and the one who is helped will fall. Both will perish together. God does not do anything morally wrong. Everything is consistent with his character. And he's going to accomplish his purposes, and he's going to do it whether he has to use calamities, whether he has to use nations to do it. And in this sense, he uses the Assyrians. He will later use the Babylonians to come in and crush the Assyrians. After that, he will use the Persians to come in and defeat the Babylonians. Then the Greeks will come in and defeat them, then the Romans. So you can see how all of this has happened. And the Greeks brought a common language. The Romans brought the road. All the people were scattered because of the Babylonians. Now, all of this falls into the all-knowing, all-seeing God who sees everything in the light of eternity. I think Charles used the term bird's eye view of everything this morning in his message. And so these verses 2 and 3 is a reminder from the Lord saying, just about 700 years ago, you were led out of Egypt. You were led out of bondage by people that enslaved you about 700 years ago. Now, you got to realize that happened in about 1320. That's rough estimate, obviously. 1320 BC. So this was 700 years prior. The people apparently have forgotten what it was like. And if you'll remember, just a few decades into their escape from Egypt, they were already ready to go back. They said, we were better as slaves. And so how quickly we forget, how quickly we go back to those things that almost destroyed us. I've seen people many times go back to an abusive relationship. They go back to drugs. They go back to alcohol. They go back to the things that almost killed them. And it's do you not remember what you went through? And we don't understand it always, and it's the same thing as Christians do. We go back to those things that were pulling us away from the Lord God. And so here, they are going to Egypt. They had been told, David even just a few hundred years prior to this had said, we don't rely on chariots. We don't rely on Egypt's horses. We don't rely on those things. We rely on the Lord God Almighty. And that's in Psalm 20, if you want to check that out. But the Egyptians would end up abandoning them even after they called upon them. And there's no middle ground with God. I've always said you're either going toward God or you're going away from them. Either you're faithful or you're not faithful. There is no, maybe I'll do this for a little bit or I'll do this. You're either all in with God or you're not. And so they had forgotten how these chariots, how these horses, how these Egyptians that were so mighty and powerful had been destroyed by a great calamity, by the Red Sea closing in on them. We just came back from our vacation. I know a lot of people are on vacation this week. And the waves from Hurricane Delta we didn't have an actual hurricane come in. It was in western Louisiana, eastern Texas, and we were in the Destin area. But we did get the effects from that. They ended up putting up 2 red flags, signaling nobody could come in to the water. But the day before they put up those 2 red flags, a friend and I went out into the water. Our spouses did not venture in. But it's amazing. The waves were not really that high. They were some of the biggest I'd seen in the Gulf. But my friend had an expensive pair of sunglasses on and broke both of, I don't know what you call these side earpieces, but broke both of them off. I found one floating in the water, but I mean, it smacked him in the face. I got knocked down just by one single wave. And of course, I knew I was doing this lesson. I was thinking, I couldn't imagine having a wall of water both sides at the Red Sea, and then all of a sudden it comes crashing down upon them. And God used that. I mean, the ocean is powerful. God is more powerful. He's the one that holds these waves back. He's the one that has the control. And I like the question, what is our default that we turn to when the circumstances come, when the struggles come, when the times come? When we're facing a difficult situation, what is our default? Who do we turn to? And I think that we oftentimes have a plan B. We have a spare tire. We have insurance, and I think God wants us to be wise about things. But He had told the Israelites specifically not to do these things, and now they were being tested, and of course they failed, and were going back to the very thing that put them into slavery to start with. And that gets us to 3 and 4, which you may be saying, okay, now here's all this judgment, here's this woe, we have all this happening, and now we get to 4 and 5. And Isaiah in verse 4 says, "For this is what the Lord said to me, as a lion or young lion growls over its prey when a band of shepherds is called out against it, and is not terrified by their shouting or subdued by their noise. So the Lord of armies will come down to fight on Mount Zion and on its hill, like hovering birds, so the Lord of armies will protect Jerusalem. By protecting it, He will rescue it. By passing over it, He will deliver it." And when God judges, as He's judging His chosen people, He's not abandoning them. And that's what we need to remember. Sometimes it seems like we're fighting this battle by ourselves. It seems like maybe we need to rely on something else. It seems like that there's nobody there to help us. But God's there. It reminds that anonymous footprints in the sand when there's only one set of footprints. We can go back and look at that. But He gives the example here of a young lion that is it's downed some prey, and the shepherds have come out to it. And no matter amount of the staffs that they have, no matter how much they yell and scream, all this thing does is just turn, look at them, and growl a little bit, and it's not moving. It's the king of the jungle, and it's not going anywhere. If you've ever seen a line on the National Geographic Channel or one of those history channels where they're showing the wildlife, and where they've got a gazelle or a wildebeest or something that they're eating on, hyenas will come around, they'll try to get a pack around, and a lot of times they'll just look up and growl and they'll back off. And anybody that has trying to think of some small dog breeds, like Pomeranian, Chihuahua, any of those itty-bitty lap dogs that people like to have in the house. If you ever seen one that's protecting a chew toy and you go to reach up and get it and it starts growling and it's got those little bitty razor sharp, it's got about 4 teeth in its head, but you're afraid of it, and it'll come in. If you get even a little bit closer, a lot of times it'll run after you. But it's a little bitty thing, but you're scared to death of it. And if you're scared to death of it and it's growling, by the way, that means you're not the alpha male or the alpha female of your house. That little, Chihuahua is, or whatever. And so that's just a side note. It's not in this lesson at all. But no matter how much screaming, that's what they tell you to do. By the way, if you're, we have a lot of bears around. We even had a bear around here that's made its rounds on Facebook. Even supposedly had a tiger, I think, but ended up being a kitty cat. But that somebody, I think they looked at it through their bifocals, and so they looked up, and it looked like this huge lion and tiger, and they called it in. So here come the police, and nobody ever saw it. But anyway, they told people, yell and scream, make yourself look bigger. And I don't think that would be a problem for me to yell and scream if I'm being attacked by a bear. But it says here that they weren't subdued by the noise, and they're not. They say that you punch it in the nose if it attacks you, and if you don't, hit it again with your stub. And so it also talks about, some of y'all get that later, but it also talks about like hovering birds. And these hovering birds, and I've seen this actually happen. It goes back when I was probably in 2nd or 3rd grade. We were at a campground, and these 2 birds were attacking something on the ground, and it caught our eye. There were several of us at the pool, and we went over and looked at it. And somebody said, hey, that's a snake. And I believe it was a black snake, and it was trying to get to the nest. We could see the nest. There was a pine tree there. And these birds were coming down, and this snake was having none of it. It was going away. And I hate snakes. I'm afraid of snakes. I don't like them. I don't kill them because I know that they do good. But I'm like, how can this little bird have any kind but they were coming down, and this snake was scared to death. And it's the same thing. When I read this, it reminded me going back to that. He says, like hovering birds, so the Lord of armies will protect Jerusalem. He's going to protect it. He says, he's talking about woe to them, but he's also, it looks like we miss some verses here, like something was left out. But we go from verse 3 to verse 4. There are no missing verses here in this chapter. He's saying that, I'm pronouncing judgment upon you because you didn't listen to me. You're not doing what I'm saying. And so we can know that too. Whenever we get tried by fire, when we fail, when we mess up, when we go back to those things that we know are not godly. When we do those things, know that God is there to rescue us. Know that, and I like the saying, that He won't put us through anything more than He can handle. And that's so that we turn to Him. And that's what He says will happen here. You're going to turn to me. We're going to see an example of that here in just a minute. Excuse me. But there are no missing verses here. It is Him saying, look, I hold the sword, but I also hold the shield for you too. And so have you ever seen God's unseen hand at work in protecting you? And maybe you didn't realize it till later. I want you to think back on a time that God protected you, and maybe you realized it later. Maybe He made you late for something and you realized that, there was a bad traffic crash, or He made you go get a checkup at the doctor and they found something sooner than later. You weren't supposed to go, but something just told you that. Something inside kept telling you that. Or somebody told you to call somebody and check on them, and you did. And if you've ever seen that, go back and think about it. Write those down also. I'll also encourage people, keep a prayer journal for these things. If you keep a prayer journal, you can go back and see how God has been working throughout. If we don't, sometimes we forget, just like the Israelites did, how they'd forgotten what they'd been through Egypt, how they had forgotten how God had rescued them many, many times. And so go back and think about when you've seen God at work protecting you in your life. And so that gets us to 6 and 7. So we're going to read these two verses. Return to the one the Israelites have greatly rebelled against. For on that day every one of you will reject the silver and gold idols that your own hands have sinfully made. So Isaiah calls on the people to return, to go back. And it's His future grace that should motivate people to do this more than this impending judgment. He's called down judgment upon them. He said, woe, remember in that very beginning, W-O-E, woe. And it should cause people to W-H-O-A, whoa, whatever I'm doing is wrong. I need to turn back and repent. And we need to look at what we're doing. We need to turn around, focus, and look at it as God is looking at it. The people had made a conscious choice. They made a conscious choice to go with Egypt. They made a conscious choice to get the protection of Assyria. Assyria then is like the bully. They took advantage of that. Now they were taking their lunch every single day, and they made them into a weakened state. Now they had to go to Egypt. Instead, all they had to do was turn to God, and He said they would protect them. We'll see an example of that here shortly. But they had made that conscious choice. They had been worshiping these idols made of silver and gold, the ones that the craftsmen had made, and they felt like they had some control. And when people feel like they have a little bit of control over something, it makes them feel better. We just got through flying to Destin, and we flew into VPS, which is Fort Walton, Destin, the airport, tiny airport. So we went down on a Airbus A320. And I try to look up everything that I can about airplanes. And by the way, you are not in control in an airplane. You're just sitting back for the ride, which is why I like to drive everywhere I go. Not just because Becky's not that good of a driver, but because I like to be in control. And also she wears that imaginary breakout. But I like to be in control. In an airplane, no matter how many frequent flyer miles you have, they never upgrade you to pilot. And you never are in control in an airplane. And it's up there. I mean, the pilot's up there, and you are put yourself in his hands. We don't like that. We like to have control over our destiny, or at least we like to think that we do. And so when people can touch stuff and hold stuff, and they would pray to these gods that they had made, it gave them illusion that they had control over these gods. And our God cannot be touched. We can see His presence. We can feel His presence. And all power and almighty God, we can't have any graven images. That's one of the 10 Commandments. But they would create these images. They would pray to them. They would worship them. And they felt like, and if you've had sometimes we have a good luck charm and different things. If we think that has power, sometimes that can get us in trouble. And so it's the same thing that they did. They would go to these idols. They would pray to them for this protection. And most of the countries around this time were polytheistic. They believed in multiple gods. And after a invading force would come in and take over, a lot of times that nation would take over whatever belief that they had. So that gets us here let me go back when I forgot to mention. When I remember when I was diagnosed with cancer back 2014, May 9th, one of those dates that you never forget. I remember asking, it was either that night or the day after, I don't recall, but I remember asking Dr. Aljadir, who was my doctor at the time, who recognized it and was able to diagnose it just from blood work. And so I asked him, I said, is there anything at all that I can do? Is there anything that I can, eat something or, it was anything. At that point, when you have no control, at that point, when you are being tested in this trial by fire, which we'll close with, it's that point when you're desperate. And he said, there's nothing you can do. Well, I knew I could pray. I knew I had a lot of people praying for me. And so when it gets to that point, that's where God wants you to get to a lot of times, is that He wants you to rely solely on Him and nothing else. Now, God put nurses and doctors and people in my life that allowed me to get through that. And a lot of times that is when we are tested, God tests our character. He sees how we are going to respond in certain situations. And we'll look at that in closing, like I said. But always, and I'll throw in this point while we're here, we got a little bit of time, always get your physicals and blood work and checks and those things done. It has saved a lot of lives, and never put off any of those tests that you can get, those regularly scheduled tests. Just tomorrow I'm going to see, I've got blood work to be drawn just for a normal physical for my regular 2020, as bad as this year's going. I hope it's good news, but I'll see Dr. Acula tomorrow, and some of y'all get that later too. If you do, let me know. But Dr. Acula will be taking my blood about 8 o'clock, and we will see how that goes, and then I see the doctor on Tuesday. But verses 8 and 9, and this will wrap us up. Like I said, we're moving right along. Only 9 verses. There was a lot to unpack early, and then we'll finish up. But verses 8 and 9, this is a great verse, and you may recognize this verse from another book in the Bible where this prophecy was fulfilled. But then Assyria will fall, but not by human sword. A sword will devour him, but not one made by man. He will flee from the sword. His young men will be put to forced labor. His rock will pass away because of fear, and his officers will be afraid because of the signal flag. This is the Lord's declaration, whose fire is in Zion, whose furnace is in Jerusalem. And if that sounds familiar, it should. But if it doesn't, and since I can't hear you say yes or no, we're going to go over this. This prophecy occurred in 701 BC. So about 2 decades prior, 721. Don't quote me on those. I may be off a day or two. But 721 was when Assyria came in and attacked the northern kingdom and took control of them. 20 years later, here we are. We have 185,000 Assyrian soldiers. They've already conquered a lot of the southern kingdom at this point. They've conquered a lot of cities. They have not conquered Jerusalem, and Jerusalem is a fortress of a city, and they have surrounded it. There's some great stories in the Bible where they rerouted the water in order to get water inside the city. It's some great things in there. But King Sennacherib, king of the Assyrian army, has surrounded Jerusalem. King Hezekiah repents. There's 185,000 soldiers out here. And one angel of the Lord comes down and smites all of them. And it's 185,000. The Assyrians are obviously terribly wounded from that. They retreat, and the Assyrians will not attack Jerusalem again. It'll be the Babylonians that come in. I think it's 100. Don't quote me on that one. But I think it's 120 years later that the Babylonians come in. They've conquered the Assyrians, and then they come in and conquer Jerusalem. And they were so confident. I mean, these are things. This is Isaiah prophesying here. This prophecy came true in 701. And now, approximately 120 years later, the Babylonians would come in, and they were so confident, they were so assured that God would not allow Jerusalem to fall, that they said, no army can conquer this city. And they did. The Babylonians came in, took them into captivity. These were all prophesied as well. And it's amazing to me that people don't listen to the prophecy of God. We have a great example of Peter. Jesus told Peter, just that night, he said, "You're going to deny me 3 times." And he said, it will never happen. And then he does. And we do the same thing. We'll hear a verse on Sunday morning. We'll hear Sunday school, Sunday night. And by Monday, we're doing the exact same thing again. It seems like we forget what we read. We forget what we teach. We forget what things we were brought up with. And we go back to those things a lot of times that we're comfortable with. But with these prophecies, God's prophecies will come true. God's promises will come true. And we can rely on those promises. He also says that if we are saved, then He will keep us, and we will be with Him forever. That doesn't mean that we won't encounter struggles or trouble on the way. And when we're saved, a lot of times that seems to be when the struggles happen. And it's that trials by fire that only make us stronger. It's like school when... I tell people, once you learn to spell cat, it goes downhill from there. Next thing you know, you're spelling soda water rhubarb or something, and rhododendron. And it gets much harder after you spell cat, so as long as you just stick with cat and be done with it. But God tests us. It makes us stronger. He continues to refine us. And that refining, like I said, as you remove some of the easy stuff, you remove some of the dirt and grime, that's the easy stuff. It's when we keep getting closer and closer to God, as we get stronger and stronger in our faith, that the testing gets harder. So the guy that flew our plane, I would hope he didn't, just solo a Cessna. I'm glad that he was on he had to test, he had to go through certain things. Just as we are tested. Raw gold is made up of all these different materials, and some easy, some not. The copper has a real close melting point to gold. If you ever heard of rose gold, that's when copper is added into it. When the master smither is there, it's probably an incorrect word, but like I said, I only went to cat. As he's there and he's smelting this gold, as he's got it in his furnace, and he is taking out all these impurities as it gets tested. It's not pleasant for that individual that's having to stand there and draw off this dross, draw off all these impurities, draw off these other materials except for the gold. It's the same thing. It's not easy. God doesn't like putting us in judgment. It hurts Him to do these things, but He knows it's what we need to do or go through. It's the same thing as a parent. And there's a fine line there. Luckily, we have an all-knowing God. He knows where that fine line is. He knows that it's where we can be tested too. He knows what point. As a parent, it's very difficult. Do we enable, are we doing this and we're enabling our children, or are we abusing our children? And it's there's that fine line that we have to find. And sometimes, unfortunately, people cross that line. Sometimes they go into the, I'm going to beat my child because they are not doing right, or I'm going to allow them to do everything they want. Luckily, we have an all-knowing God that knows exactly how to test us. He knows exactly what things are our weak spots. And it's the same thing when I was in the Army. I worked on electronic equipment, which was medical equipment, biomedical equipment technician. And we did what was called the smoke test. Probably not the best thing in the world, but if you built a piece of equipment back from the ground up and the first time you turned it on, we called it the smoke test. If you saw smoke, you knew, well, you messed up somewhere, you got to go find it. We would also do a thing after a piece of equipment was there. We would turn up the voltage. We would put varying voltage on this piece of equipment. We would begin to turn that up gradually. We would turn it up until that bad component smoked. If it was a resistor, it made there was a certain smell to a resistor when it burns. And so we would know that was where we need to replace it. God knows just how much to turn up the voltage on us to find that weak spot. And then we replace it. We fix it. We go through that. Integrated circuit boards would do blue smoke. And when that blue smoke would come out, you would say, oh, yeah, well, the genie's out now. Now it won't work because the genie was what was making this equipment work. And that was just our joke. But God is not a genie. He's not a genie in the bottle that we just rub whenever we need him and he'll pop out and we use him. And I think that's a lot of times we just keep him canned up until, in case of emergency, break glass. And we need to know that we need to pray consistently. We need to be in his word consistent to see what the character of God is, to know that he will rescue us. And that person, that master goldsmith that was there, that was refining this gold, I don't know if you know how he knew it was done. That was the most common question. How do you know that before it gets to the boiling point and you get everything mixed back up again? And he would know that the gold was finished when he would look in it and he would see his own reflection. And he knew that all the impurities were out at that time, that he had 24 karat gold. 24 karat means 24 parts out of 24 parts is perfect. We will never reach perfection here on this earth, but God is looking. We are Christian. We're supposed to be Christ-like. He wants to see his reflection in us. If we're here, we're saved, then one day we will be made perfect. We will be seeing his face. We'll be seeing his image in heaven, and we will see that reflection. And so don't be afraid of the refining, the testing of the Lord God Almighty. It makes us stronger. It gets us closer to God. It tests our character. And others around that can see that, and it will only help them. I appreciate everybody's attention tonight. I don't know if there were any questions on as we went through. I didn't look over there. I know I probably looked everywhere but breaking the fourth wall of the camera. But if there are any questions, and I'm not sure if Gary is shaking his head no, and my wife is giving me the evil eye because I think I, probably made her mad about the driving, but at least I didn't say the etymology of woe was woe man. And, I did say, I thought you shut me off. Are we not off, Gary? But once again, thanks for everybody for coming in and tuning in, and I do appreciate it, and see you all Sunday.